A couple of years ago, my sister and I took a road trip together. We were driving across a few states to visit some family, and we broke the trip up into 2 days. On the first night, we stopped at a small motel just off the highway. It wasn't a fancy place by any stretch, but it looked fine. Clean enough, decent price. We got a room with 2 beds and checked in pretty late, maybe around 11 at night. We were both tired from driving, and we went to sleep pretty quickly. I woke up at some point in the night. I didn't know what time it was at first. The room was dark except for the light coming in under the door from the outside walkway. I just lay there for a second, and then I noticed that there was a shadow in the gap under the door, like someone was standing right outside the room. 2 feet, just standing there. I watched it for a minute, and it didn't move. I whispered my sister's name and she woke up. I pointed at the door and she saw it too. We both just lay there, watching. The shadow was completely still. Whoever was out there was just standing in front of our door and not moving. We waited for a knock or something, but nothing happened. My sister grabbed her phone and checked the time. It was 3:15 in the morning. After maybe 5 more minutes, the shadow shifted. It looked like the person turned slightly. Then we heard a knock. Very soft, almost too soft, like they didn't actually want to be heard. Neither of us said anything. We just stayed completely quiet and still. The knock came again, a little louder this time. Then a voice, a man's voice, said something like he was sorry to bother us, but he needed to use the phone. His voice sounded strange. Not panicked the way you might expect someone to sound if they genuinely needed help. Very flat and calm. Neither of us responded. We stayed quiet. My sister had already dialed the front desk and was waiting. After a moment, the man said something again. He said he knew someone was in there, and he just needed to use the phone for a minute. His voice was still that same flat calm. The front desk picked up, and my sister quietly told them what was happening. They said they would send someone to check right away. By the time the person from the motel walked the outside path to our room, the man was gone. They checked the area and didn't find anyone. We asked to see the security camera footage from the walkway outside. The motel manager looked at it with us. You could clearly see a man standing outside our door for about 8 minutes. When the lights from the motel office came on, he walked away calmly toward the parking lot and just got into a car and left. No plates visible in the footage. We left before sunrise and finished the drive the next morning. We still talk about it sometimes, and we still have no idea what that man actually wanted. The way he knew we were in there, the way he just stood there for that long without making a sound. I don't think he really needed to use a phone. I used to do overnight security at a large commercial building. It was a pretty uneventful job most of the time. The building was a big office complex, multiple floors, lots of long hallways and conference rooms and that sort of thing. During the day it was busy. At night, it was just me. I had to do walkthroughs on a schedule, checking doors and making sure everything was in order. Most nights nothing happened and it was honestly a little boring. You get comfortable in a quiet building after a while. You stop being jumpy. This was maybe a year into the job, when something happened that I still think about. I was doing my 3 in the morning walkthrough. This was my second walkthrough of the night. I started on the top floor and worked my way down. Everything was normal. Empty offices, locked doors, lights off. I got down to the second floor and was walking the main hallway when I noticed that the light was on in one of the conference rooms at the end of the hall. I knew for a fact it had been off when I did my first walkthrough. Nobody else was supposed to be in the building. I walked toward it, and as I got closer, I could hear voices. Quiet, but more than one of them. I stopped in the hallway and just stood there and listened. It sounded like 2 people having a conversation, but I could not make out what was being said. It was just low murmuring. I reached for my radio and called it in, to let dispatch know what I was hearing. Then I went to the door of the conference room and opened it. There were two men sitting at the far end of the conference table. They both looked up at me when I came in, and didn't seem panicked or startled at all. They were dressed in normal clothes. One was older, maybe late 50s, and one looked like he was in his 30s. I asked them who they were and what they were doing there. The older one said a name, like he was saying he had permission to be there. The younger one didn't say anything. I told them they needed to come with me while I sorted this out. The older man nodded and stood up. But when I looked over at the younger one, he had not moved. He was just staring at the table. I tried to get his attention. The older man looked at him and said something quietly, and the younger man slowly stood up. Something about the whole thing felt deeply wrong. Neither of them was aggressive, but there was something off about the way they were behaving. Especially the younger one, who still had not said a single word, or looked at me directly. I walked into the lobby and got their IDs. Dispatch looked into it, and apparently the man the older guy had named did work there and had after-hours access. But when they called him, he said he had not given anyone permission to be in the building that night. He didn't know either of these men. Security from another location came, and the police were called. Both men were removed. I never found out who they were, or how they got in. There was no sign of a break-in anywhere. All the entry points were secure. The whole thing was never really explained to my satisfaction, and I left that job not long after. A few years back, I was living alone in an apartment on the 3rd floor of this older building. It wasn't a bad place, but it was the kind of building where the walls were thin, and you could hear your neighbors pretty easily. After a while, you get used to the sounds. You learn what's normal and what isn't. A toilet flushing next door at midnight, somebody's TV going, footsteps above you. You stop noticing all of it after a while. So, when something genuinely out of the ordinary happens, it stands out. I was a night owl back then, and would usually stay up pretty late. But on this particular night, I had gone to bed earlier than usual. Maybe around 11 or so, which was early for me. I fell asleep pretty quickly and was out cold. Then, at some point in the middle of the night, I woke up. No particular reason at first. I just opened my eyes. I looked at my phone and it was just past 3 in the morning. I lay there for a minute, just kind of staring at the ceiling, waiting to fall back asleep. Then I heard it. It was a knock at my front door. Not loud, not frantic. Just a slow, quiet knock. 3 times. I sat up in bed and just listened. I thought maybe I had imagined it, or that it was a dream. A minute went by and there was nothing. I was about to lay back down, when it came again. 3 slow knocks, same as before. Same rhythm, same pace. Very deliberate. I got up and walked out into the hallway that led to the front door. I looked through the peephole. The hallway outside was lit by this dim yellow light that was always on. I could see all the way to the stairwell from there. There was nobody. The hallway was completely empty. I stood there and watched for a good minute and a half. Nothing moved out there. I went back to bed, but I couldn't fall asleep right away. I kept listening. It was quiet though, and eventually I drifted off. When I woke up in the morning, I figured it was just some drunk neighbor at the wrong door or something. That's a pretty reasonable explanation, and I was fine with it. But it happened again the following night. Same time, just after 3 in the morning. This time I was already half awake, and I heard it clearly. 3 slow knocks. I got up faster this time and went straight to the peephole. Again, there was nobody in the hallway. Not a single person. I stood there watching for a long time. The stairwell was visible, and nobody came or went. What made it worse this time was that I had my ear pressed to the door after a minute of seeing nothing through the peephole, and I could hear breathing on the other side. It was faint, but it was there, slow and steady. Whoever it was had to be standing right up against the door, pressed to the side where I couldn't see them through the peephole. I said, loudly, that I was calling the police. The breathing stopped, and I heard footsteps walking away fast, then the stairwell door opening and closing. I did call the building manager the next day and told them what had happened. They said they weren't aware of anything going on. I never heard the knock again after that, and I never found out who it was. But for a long time after, I had trouble sleeping, and I kept waking up just after 3 in the morning, just lying there, listening. This happened to me when I was in my mid-20s. I was working a late shift at the time, and would usually get home somewhere between midnight and 1 in the morning, depending on the night. I lived in a house at that point, renting it with one other roommate. He worked early mornings, so by the time I got home, he had already been asleep for hours. It was just routine. I'd come in quietly, make something to eat, watch something on my laptop, and then go to bed. Nothing exciting. One night I got home a little later than usual. It was closer to 1:30. I pulled into the driveway and noticed the light in the living room was on. That was a little strange, because my roommate never left lights on. He was pretty particular about stuff like that, always turning things off before bed. I figured maybe he had just forgotten this one time. I went inside and the living room was empty. The TV was off and my roommate's bedroom door was closed, which it always was when he was sleeping. I turned the living room light off and went to the kitchen. I was putting together something to eat when I heard a sound coming from the basement. We had a basement, but we basically used it for storage. Neither of us went down there very much. The sound was like something shifting around, like boxes or something being moved. I stopped what I was doing and listened. It happened again. Something was definitely moving around down there. I figured maybe there was an animal that had somehow gotten in. A raccoon or something. The basement had a small window that we didn't always keep latched properly. I opened the basement door and called down into it and said hello. The moving stopped immediately. I hit the light switch on the wall and the staircase lit up, but I couldn't see the full basement from the top of the stairs. I'm not sure what made me go down there. Looking back, I probably should not have, but I did. I went down the stairs slowly, and when I got to the bottom and could see the whole room, there was nothing there. Just the same old boxes and storage stuff. Nothing looked disturbed. The small window was closed and latched. I stood down there for a minute and heard nothing, so I went back upstairs. I woke my roommate up and asked him if he had been in the basement, and he said no. He had gone to bed at 9 and hadn't gotten up at all. He didn't know about the light either. Said he definitely turned it off before bed. We did a walkthrough of the rest of the house and everything was locked and looked fine. Nothing was missing. There was no sign of anything. I had my roommate come down to the basement with me and we looked around more carefully and didn't find anything out of place. But I know what I heard. Something was moving around down there. And as soon as I called out, it stopped. An animal doesn't do that. An animal doesn't stop and stay completely quiet and still, just because someone says hello. Neither of us ever figured out what it was. I lived in that house for another 8 months and nothing like that ever happened again. But I never went into the basement alone after dark. This one happened pretty recently, within the last year or so. I live alone in a house in a suburban neighborhood. It's a quiet street, good neighbors, nothing unusual ever really happens. I had been living there for about 2 years at that point without any issues. I'm a decent sleeper usually, but I had been going through a stretch where I kept waking up in the middle of the night for no reason. My doctor said it was probably just stress. I wasn't too worried about it. One night I woke up like that again. I looked at my phone and it was 3 in the morning, almost exactly. I lay there for a bit, just waiting to fall back asleep the way you do. My bedroom window faces the backyard. I had the blinds down but not fully closed, so there was a small gap at the bottom. I wasn't paying attention to it at first, but then I noticed there was a light back there, like a flashlight or something, moving slowly through the yard. I sat up and looked more carefully through the gap in the blinds. There was definitely somebody in my backyard. I could see the beam of a light moving slowly, like they were walking the perimeter of the yard. I watched for a minute and they were clearly going around the outside edge, back near the fence. I grabbed my phone and called 911. I kept watching while I was on the phone. The dispatcher told me to stay inside, and that they were sending someone. The light kept moving slowly. Then it stopped. It was back near the far corner of the yard. I kept watching, and the light just sat there, not moving. About 4 or 5 minutes went by, and the light stayed completely still in that same spot. Then I heard a car out front, which I assumed was the police. About 30 seconds after that, the light in the back went out. Just off, instantly. 2 officers walked the yard with their lights and found nothing. Nobody back there. No sign of how anyone would have gotten in or out. The back fence was locked from the inside and there was no evidence of it being climbed. The side gate was also locked. They looked around and couldn't explain it. What bothered me most was the timing. Whoever was out there turned that light off within seconds of the police car arriving out front. They would have had no way of seeing the front of the house from where they were, in that back corner of the yard. They either heard the car, or they saw something else, or somehow, they just knew it was time to go. The officers told me to put in a security camera, which I did the very next day. I reviewed the camera footage a few nights after installing it, and noticed something. There was motion detected in the backyard at 3 in the morning, 2 nights after the first incident. But there was nothing visible on the footage. Just the yard. The camera had triggered on motion, but there was nothing there that I could see. It happened twice more in the same week. Always right around 3. Always. Nothing visible on the camera. After that, it stopped. It's been several months now, and the camera hasn't triggered at night since. I don't know what was in my yard that first night, or what kept setting the camera off afterward. I do sleep a little worse than I used to, and I always check the camera before bed now.